Hello, everyone. I'm Rod Alberts, and I'd like to welcome you to this edition of Queued Up Mobility. These sessions, brought to you by our good friends at Deloitte, are intended to bring you the latest news from some of the greatest minds in the mobility sector. As a reminder, if you ever miss a broadcast or you want to rewatch a session, you can find them on our website at NAIS.com. Now let's get to today's content. Our panel today, made up from executives from Amazon Web Services, HERE Technologies, and Verizon, will take a look at 5G playing field and how this technology will play a key role in increasing road safety on our way to autonomous driving. Glenn Stevens, Executive Director at Amish Auto, will act as our moderator today. Glenn, take it away.
Hey, thanks, Rod, and thanks for the opportunity today. And it's great to be with everybody across the country and maybe globally too. So welcome to our Queued Up session. One piece of housekeeping today. We're going to have a little bit of time at the end, I hope, for Q&A. So what you need to do is go to Slido, Slido.com, and you could register and follow the instructions there to enter your Q&A if you've got one. And I'll be happy to pass that along if we have time. But right now, today, what we're going to do is we're going to dive right in. I work with a lot of different companies as Executive Director of Amish Auto, technology companies, OEM suppliers, and a lot of the newer entrants, I would say, too. These companies today are part of emerging new technology. So we're traditionally used to the components we hear about in an automobile, but today you're going to hear about edge computing and 5G and latency. And I told the gang earlier, I know what latency is because my son's always complaining about lag time in gaming. So that's how I put it in context for myself. But, you know, the past few years, things have been coming together and these companies have been working closely for several years now. And as suppliers with new technology, they're relatively new companies. And combined, they have about 68 years in business, these three companies. And if you look at the top technology companies that are from the traditional industry, those companies have 349 years, the top three companies. So you can see where we're at today. Each has a short deck, and then we're going to do two things. They're going to get a little tutorial on the things that they're working on, and then we're going to do a little Q&A. So with that, I'd like to introduce Jeff Franzen from Verizon, and he heads up a global team of quite a few people, and he's joining us from Colorado today, right? Where I understand it's a snow day, Jeff, is that right?
Yes, thank you, Glenn. It is a snow day, and staying on the kids theme, I've got 4 of them. So at any point, someone could be busting in behind the door behind me. So we'll see how it goes.
So we'll keep an eye on that door to see what surprises we get during your presentation.
Yeah, you never know around here.
Okay.
So I'll jump right in. So I run the Verizon Location Technology team. As Glenn mentioned, I'm based in Denver. And so, wanted to kick things off with, when you think about autonomous vehicles and a safer future for roadways, you look at these 3 companies and they, may not have been the first 3 that you would have expected to, be sitting here talking to you. But I think as we go through the content today, what you'll start to realize is when you want to bring something like we're envisioning forward and make it a reality, the type of infrastructure and the requirements and kind of the core pillars of what we're talking about, I think it's going to make a lot more sense in terms of what each of us are bringing to the table and how we're working together to do that. And, as I mentioned, I run the location technology team and have been working very closely with HERE Technologies since I've arrived and long before I was here. But location is such a critical element. And HERE obviously brings, best of breed in that domain. And so when you think about, creating maps and HD maps and, lanes in the vehicles and being alert and aware of what lanes they're in, location is such a critical element for safer future and autonomous vehicles. And then when you think about connectivity, which is obviously this is where Verizon strong suit is you think about all the different vehicles out there, all the different sensors, all of the different information that is available and being generated today, and being able to connect that and have that be transmitted from vehicle to vehicle to infrastructure, the amount of the infrastructure required and the connectivity, really that's what 5G is bringing to bear. And before that, it really wasn't possible. And then we've been working very closely with AWS and Wavelength, and you get mobile edge computing, which again is delivering those low latency critical applications at the edge. Again, when you bring all of these things together, that's when you start to get to, okay, I can see how the different pieces come together to create that autonomous future and safer roadways. And again, Verizon being a leader in 5G and MEC, these things are extremely critical when you're talking about speed and processing power to enable capabilities that will help make vehicles safer. And some of these things include autonomous mobility, split second decision making, early detection, so knowing what's going to happen and avoiding it, precise positioning, also a very critical element, which I talked about earlier, and then prediction. So based on where my vehicle is traveling, other vehicles around me, is there a pedestrian in the roadway, is there an emergency vehicle approaching, being able to predict those scenarios and respond to them before you get into a situation that might be catastrophic. And so again, kind of bringing it back together, you have connectivity, you have processing power, and you have location, and that's really where you get the future of road safety. And then again, Verizon's 5G ultra wideband combined with AWS Wavelength, coupled with HERE's location data and technology, and the expertise between these three companies, this is going to help us reimagine the future of enhanced road safety. And so super excited to be here and talk about it with you all. So if we go to the next slide. So, going back to not only just these three companies, when you think about Verizon, we also are probably not the first name that you think of in automotive, and that's exactly what we're here to change. And so when you think about the infrastructure that's going to be required, all of the different vehicles, all of the different road infrastructure, and all of the different telemetry of those vehicles, actors on the road that may not be connected, all of that information has to be communicated in split-second timing so that decisions can be made to make the vehicles and the roadway safer. And so that is, that's what we're starting to bring forward into the automotive industry. And so some of those things, an IoT platform that enables development of large-scale, latency-sensitive automotive applications at the edge. Smart cities is another one where you're starting to integrate not only vehicles but road infrastructure so that they can communicate with one another. So all of these things are critically important. And inside of Verizon, we actually have an entire team that is focused on the R&D for this entire strategy. And again, what we deliver and what we bring is broad scale and capabilities. So if you think about this, holistic environment, really the vision of what we're getting at is a lot of the services that vehicles use today live in the vehicle. And so we're imagining a future where those services and those critical services can be delivered when they need to be delivered and the latency requirements over the network. And so that's kind of a big paradigm shift to how things happen today. And so again, when you think about the 5G environment, what this also brings to the industry is network slicing. And that's extremely important when you think about, help tailoring the capacity and the capabilities of the network for each of the different services and based on the needs of those services. And then also, I mentioned before, connected infrastructure. So Verizon is also exploring a vehicle to infrastructure opportunity where we can leverage MEC. And then that we think is going to reinvigorate the roadside infrastructure market where, a vehicle can understand, is the light turning red? Is it turning green? And how would I respond to that? And I know you can all relate to, there's been a number of times when you're in a platoon of vehicles and you're heading towards a light that's been green for, a minute and no cars have gone through it. And the minute that platoon of vehicles gets there, it turns red. And then you're stopping and then, cross traffic, no one's coming across. And so just being more intelligent and smarter about that. And that's going to reduce congestion, reduce emissions. So just a lot of possibilities in this domain. And so if we go to the next slide, again, I work at the location technology team here at Verizon and working very closely with HERE. Location is something that we believe is just critical and a value-added service that is just going to be required when you look at this future and safer roadways. And so when we think about some of the value-added services that are going to be delivered on top of this infrastructure, you can't have that discussion without thinking about location. And so our location team is bringing new software packages to the market in 2021, which are going to enable autonomous vehicles with the power of location. And these are things we're doing right now. And I'll go through some of the specific things that we've worked with HERE already in this area. And then, autonomous vehicles are going to need to be more aware of their surroundings. So where are they? What vehicles are around them? What is their trajectory? What are they doing? And are they going to respond to their actions? And this is going to be, obviously, to function safely and efficiently, these vehicles are going to require a combination of complex and fragmented services today, but we're looking to kind of bundle that with connectivity and deliver that over the network. And so in order to do that, or some of the things that we're thinking about these services are going to be HD maps, network intelligent routing. So, the more that services are delivered over the network, connectivity is going to be critical. So, being able to navigate cars based on network congestion and network coverage is going to be extremely critical. Object detection, understanding where connected things are on the road, and then potentially non-connected things, bicyclists, pedestrians, and then again, precise positioning. So being able to know exactly where the vehicle is, what lane it's in, and how it's going to respond to situations around it. So again, kind of going back to, the things I just talked about at a high level, that's, being able to localize, being able to perceive highly accurate and semantically rich data to pinpoint lane level positions, identify lane boundaries, traffic signs, road objects, things like that. And then again, getting to that level where we can predict. So avoiding dangerous situations altogether. And then furthermore, planning. So if you want to avoid, a potentially dangerous situation where a road's going to get congested, if all of these vehicles are communicating and the infrastructure is communicating, you could potentially route vehicles to avoid congestion altogether and avoid potentially dangerous situations. And again, some of the work that we've already done with here in this space, we've already done collision avoidance, so detecting pedestrians and bicyclists in crosswalks and being able to avoid them, a visual positioning service, so understanding based on what the car is seeing, sensing where it is and being able to position itself accuracy. And then something that we're bringing to market as Verizon is RTK, so our hyper precise real time positioning. What we call real-time kinematics. Again, getting that centimeter level accuracy of placing these vehicles in specific scenarios. When you're talking about vehicles traveling at high rates of speed, you can't afford to be wrong. You can't be a meter or two off. You have to precisely position these vehicles exactly where they're at. So with that, I will turn it back over to you, Glenn.
Great. Thank you, Jeff. You got a few moving parts going on. And speaking of a next moving part, you referred to here, and Charity Rummery. Charity, I'm going to let you introduce yourself with your title because it's a long one and you cover a lot of ground, but you've got 20 plus years of experience, particularly with a lot of real-time location services experience. So, and I know your company, but we'd like to hear a little bit more about it and how you fit into this ecosystem equation. So over to you.
Great. Thank you, Glenn. And thank you, Jeff. Really appreciate the call out for some of the great work we're all doing as partners together with Verizon and with AWS. So as Glenn mentioned, my name is Charity Rummery. I run automotive and industrial sales at HERE Technologies. And at HERE Technologies, as they mentioned, we have a really long tenure in location technology in particular. If you bring up my slide, you'll see that HERE has been in location for more than 30 plus years. And we've really been innovating very recently on all sorts of different digital mapping technologies. In fact, today we make millions of updates every single day to our digital maps. And we have global OEMs all around the world leveraging this information, as well as our partners, Verizon and AWS. Our focus at HERE Technologies is to make sure that our customers and our partners can leverage the power of location to better their business. And we are currently in more than 150 million in-vehicle navigation systems. So clearly we have a sweet spot in the automotive market and a long tenure there. Go ahead and move forward to the next slide, and we'll talk a little bit about the role of location as it pertains to today's dialogue. For automotive specifically, location is critical. It enables better decision-making for both the vehicle as well as the driver. It gives you information about the roadway and the events that might be happening ahead of you that you may not even know about. Conditions change live in real time, and it's critical that both the drivers and the vehicles can tap into that information when they don't have clean line of sight to it. The other thing that location can do, especially as we move to automated driving, is it gives redundancy to the onboard vehicle sensors. And that is critical for precise positioning and for path planning as we lay the foundation for autonomous driving. Moving ahead, we'll see that significantly, location also helps the driver and the vehicle interact with one another. It really enables better decision-making as the driver interacts with the automated driving system. It helps one another understand when a driver needs to take over and when it's okay to drive in an automated fashion. For example, location can dictate the zones of the roadway where it's okay to drive autonomously, and then areas where a driver needs to take over. The other nice thing about location in the cockpit is that it gives consistency among multiple systems that are there for the driver's benefit. Things like the in-vehicle infotainment system, the ADAS capabilities, and autonomous driving capabilities as we get to that part of the market. And then finally, moving ahead, location also allows you to share actionable information between vehicles. And Jeff alluded to this. We're going to a place where the vehicle will communicate with infrastructure. The vehicle will communicate with the vehicles around it, and will also communicate with other things like pedestrians, as an example. And location is a critical underpinning of that. The other thing location allows you to do with a 5G underpinning is share data so that you get a digital representation of the roadway ahead, and it becomes sort of a collective and shared memory for others that are autonomously driving. And so we'll see this community build live in real time on the roadways as we advance with autonomous driving. And so finally, I just want to thank our partners that we're here with today. I'm really pleased to be a part of this. Jeff mentioned we are already doing things together with both AWS and with Verizon. We're doing low latency pilot projects around hazard warnings, leveraging 5G and mobile edge compute. I think this is a really timely topic, and these are great partners of HERE, and I am excited to be here representing HERE Technologies. Thank you, Glenn.
Thanks, Charity. So we went from Denver, and Charity is in Chicago. Now we're going to leapfrog all the way out to the West Coast to Orange County, where I know it's not a snow day. We talked about that earlier. Samir Buyuru from Amazon Web Services, thanks for joining us today. We all know Amazon, but we probably don't know a lot about AWS. So thank you for joining us today. You are also a veteran of the industry, and we're really pleased to have you. So take it away, Samir.
Thank you, Glenn, for the kind introduction. You're right. We haven't seen snow for 10 years, so we have seen wildfires and earthquakes, though. So we have our fair share. So my name is Samir Buyuru, and I run the telco strategy and business development function here at Amazon Web Services. For those of you who don't know what AWS does, we're the leading cloud provider. Our customers have made us the leading cloud provider overall and for the automotive industry. We have the broadest, deepest set of services to support automotive companies and help them meet regulatory security requirements while doing so. Most global OEM and Tier 1 suppliers run significant workloads on AWS. And you can see some of the partners that we have there, not least here. Thank you, Charity, for running on Amazon Web Services to deliver services to the automotive industry. So what's a telco guy doing here in the middle of the automotive industry? We're extraordinarily customer obsessed. And what our telco customers have told us is that we need to partner along with the service providers such as HERE to serve the needs of automotive customers where they are. And so we partnered with Verizon and HERE last year to bring the cloud to the 5G edge. And if we move on, I'll talk a little bit about what that actually means in real life. So there's a lot of driver experiences that both Charity and Jeff have talked about, all the way from safety applications to vehicle security to map updates. And you can serve them in many, many different ways with different types of infrastructure. Some of these services can reside in a central cloud, which is one of the 77 availability zones we have across 24 regions worldwide. Or you can serve them from the edge of the network itself. And both use cases coexist, and it's just about partitioning and intelligently apportioning the use case to the appropriate infrastructure. So we, as AWS, want to take the cloud where you, as the automotive customer, can consume it through our partners, such as HERE and Verizon. We move on. I'll illustrate what we do where. And so you'll see for applications such as LiDAR and radar and RGB sensor orchestration, or for in-vehicle security and payments, whenever it's latency sensitive, latency is just the round trip time for a application to respond. Whenever it's latency sensitive, we have invested in something called wavelength zones in partnership with Verizon. And when it's not latency sensitive, we have our centralized cloud available running the whole gamut of services, from data lakes to AI ML to customer personalization, and so on and so forth. So if we move on one more, we'll talk about what that latency need is. So when we first started at AWS, a lot of our customers were bringing data from wherever the data was generated to the centralized cloud. And even then, partners such as Verizon were helping us bring that data into our centralized cloud, and they continue to do that. But now, what we're hearing from our customers is that they want the cloud to be available where the data sits. So we've invested with our partners in developing a continuum of a cloud, all the way from our regions, which are continental scale coverage, down to metro specific areas where we co-locate our infrastructure with partners such as Verizon and then run latency sensitive services like Charity described on those latency sensitive nodes. So think of it as a meeting of the cloud infrastructure and the needs of the customer wherever geographically and latency wise it's needed. So if we move on just a little bit more, so 5G is, we view this as a catalyzing event. 5G is significantly faster than 4G. And if you were at all familiar, in the traditional mobile architecture, traffic from devices such as this phone had to go from the device to the cell tower to what they call a metro aggregation site, to something called a regional aggregation site, then traverse the internet to AWS services. All of that adds latency. It adds time for an application to respond. Now, although 5G is significantly faster than 4G, we still have to deal with those hops to get to a centralized cloud. So by embedding AWS infrastructure directly within the 5G networks, we're able to significantly reduce the latency associated with these multiple hops and make AWS and the services that ride on it available where you as the automotive industry needs to consume it. What does this mean in real life? Let's just use a real life example. If we move on to the next slide. So in a safety application, for example, if you're traveling roughly 60, 65 miles per hour in an autonomous car, if that decision takes 180 milliseconds, then you essentially have traveled 17 feet before anything happens. Whereas now with wavelength, if that decision takes only 20 milliseconds, you travel less than 2 feet. And you can obviously infer the significant consumer benefits from reducing that stopping distance and the time to reaction. This is just a very simple example. There are literally hundreds of use cases that get enabled for the automotive industry on wavelength. And my thanks to Verizon for being our launch partner with wavelength, and for HERE providing all of their innovative services as one of our first partners to deploy on wavelength. With that, I'll hand it back to you, Glenn, and for the audience if they have any questions.
Thank you, Samir. And I do appreciate that visualization or case study, because I think that kind of wraps it up nicely. Let's jump right in. Jeff, I remember when I got my boss got 2 bag phones into our office. I'm dating myself a little bit here. 1G analog, and now we are in 5G. Why is it such a game changer for the automotive industry itself?
Yeah, it's a great question. So when you think about the number of connected cars and the need, what we're talking about for smarter vehicles and more awareness of, what's going on in the environment, it's, the need for data to be shared across different devices and, have a network to carry that load. 5G becomes critical. And I think that's what has largely been holding us back from something that we're talking about today is, the infrastructure and the connectivity to do that. And so 5G is essentially going to help us support a more robust communication system between connected cars and infrastructure. And as the 5G future is more realized, we're starting to see a significant shift in those capabilities of, what we can do over the network and how we can deliver those services and those functions. And so, if you think about it, you kind of, I think it's always interesting because, people always just think about, 5G, it's just another G, but you think about 1G, we had, mobile phones, and 2G, we had text messaging. 3G basically put the internet in our pockets. And then 4G launched really this latest round of, what we've seen with mobile apps, and, that entire market has exploded. And in 5G is really, I think, a significant improvement, not only in speed, but throughput and latency. And so the number of devices that can be connected and sharing information back and forth has just exponentially increased with 5G and MEC capabilities. And so that's really the catalyst for what we're talking about today.
Got it. So when we look at all these connected services and we look at connected infrastructure and in the connected vehicle itself, this is absolutely a game changer. Charity, you all touched a little bit about some of the benefits. Can you talk a little bit about what this means? Obviously, safety is really going to be impacted in a positive way, and that's number one. But what about some of the other consumer benefits?
Well, just in general, I think the critical piece here is that 5G, just to talk about that for a second, is really becoming widely accepted for the next generation of connected and autonomous vehicles. So, that wasn't always the case. And as the industry's matured, it's really starting to become the infrastructure of choice. Automotive manufacturers are signaling their support for it. And there is an expanding base of 5G Automotive Association. Like, it's getting larger and larger, and the momentum is building behind it. And I do think it's a really compelling infrastructure. The thing that gets so exciting about it is it's what enables V2X communication, vehicles to vehicles, vehicle to pedestrian, vehicle to infrastructure. It's what enables your car to all of a sudden start talking to everything around it. And so if you sit in a consumer seat, you say, well, what is the benefit to me? I really see it in terms of benefits now, in the medium term, and in a long term. But right now, the benefit is in safety and convenience. When you think about driving your car, you have that situational awareness of location technology, exactly where you are and the context of the roadway around you. And you have that super low latency ability to communicate, to provide something like hazard warnings. So you can react, as Samir said, in near real time to what's happening in front of you. So I think right now we're already seeing the safety and convenience benefits. Self-parking, pedestrian communication, lots of neat things are unfolding because that infrastructure is coming into place. And then in the medium term, we have the real proliferation of vehicle-to-vehicle communication, vehicle to infrastructure, vehicle to pedestrian. And then you layer in the concepts of mobile edge compute and location technology, and then you have everything for precise position and path planning for autonomous driving. And then I think Jeff hit on the long-term benefit, that coordination in real time of all the disparate data streams that are needed to bring together really a digital representation of cities and roadways in motion, so that the driver and the vehicle get the right information at the right time. And so that's full of consumer benefits and really advances the way that we think about transporting ourselves and what mobility means to each of us.
Got it. Which is a good segue to Samir. I had a question for you about wavelength zones and how that comes into play and how critical that is. Obviously, we're all used to dropping a signal, and that's less and less these days. But now we're talking about a vehicle that's moving and moving within regions, so to speak, too. Can you talk a little bit about that? Explain that a little bit more.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's just step back for a minute. Wavelength is just AWS infrastructure that is co-located with our communication service provider partners such as Verizon. So with just an AWS account, customers deploy their 5G applications in wavelength zones in regions, right? So what this basically means is that you can scale up or down the capacity that's required. The availability is always going to be just as good as if it were operating in the region. And as you know, many safety critical and latency critical workloads run today on AWS. You also have the concept of application portability. So as a vehicle moves from one wavelength zone to another, you can essentially follow the vehicle with your application across these geographies and across use cases. And to address Jeff's point of slicing, if you need an extra bandwidth slice for 10 seconds, you don't end up paying for that extra bandwidth slice forever, right? You just pay for those 10 seconds, download what you need to, whether it's an over-the-air update or whether it's a video file that you want to play on the screen for your kids, or whether you're gaming, right? To your point. And it just becomes pay-as-you-go pricing without any preset configurations or planning. And that's the real advantage that the cloud brings to the edge.
Got it. Okay. Well, seeing as I'm an unlimited data plan person, because I couldn't go the other route for very long with 3 kids and a lot of cell phones, I get that. One of the things I noticed in all of your bios, and you've mentioned it, all of you also, and I know your company. I'm a Verizon customer. I'm an Amazon customer. I'm probably a Here customer, and I don't know it. But you're all very focused on the customer. It's an obsession. I think that word comes out very frequently. But maybe all 3 of you can talk about how that customer is central and what's going to evolve. Charity, you mentioned that what's happening now, what's going to happen in the future. But how does the customer come into this play for your companies, and how does that drive what you do? Jeff, I'll start with you.
Yeah. So I think from a company standpoint, Verizon has been in the business of connecting people for, long before I was even on this earth. So, when you look at the lineage of the company, and I think this is just another evolution of how to connect customers and get critical information that they need. And maybe that information tomorrow is going to be received through the vehicle for the driver to act on. But I think, in the future, the vehicle is going to receive that information, and maybe the vehicle is making the decision. And so I think for me, it really just comes down to, at least in the short term, safety, I think, as Charity had mentioned. And, personally for me, I've lost 2 people very close to me in a traffic accident that could have been prevented. And so this is a very, it's close to my heart in terms of what we're doing and why we're doing it. And that's not lost on me. And I think that's extremely important when we think about the consumer of making, the driver and the passengers in the vehicle. I have 4 kids, making them safer. I mean, that's, there's no more noble mission than, I think, trying to bring these solutions and make the roadway safer. And so really, I think for me, it's an extension of what we've been doing for a long time in connecting consumers to other consumers and, communication. And now we're just extending that into safer roadways and vehicles and, making consumers face safer. And then I think there's also the other element of convenience. Just when you think about infotainment and how that could potentially start to look very different and what services are delivered in vehicles. And, there's a consumer benefit right there as well. So I just think top to bottom, the consumer stands to benefit in so many different ways.
Great. Charity, your thoughts?
Yeah, the consumer is clearly at the center of everything we do. And I think we all know that the experience can improve in multiple ways, safety being one of them, as Jeff mentioned. But when you think about just the consumer journey experience, there's this new concept that's in market with some partners that I'm working on. And I serve on the board of the Experiences Per Mile Advisory Council. How do we as consumers start to shift what a journey is about? It's no longer about RPMs, it's about EPMs. What are the experiences per mile that we can have? And Jeff alluded to infotainment experiences. The world is going to become very personalized as you think about the vehicle itself. It's an extension of your home. It's an extension of your family. So personalizing the journey by the type of journey will be something that we see. Is this an errand? Are we dropping kids off at school? Is this a road trip? And the vehicle and the experience can behave differently based on that journeys and what you prefer as a consumer. And then also your consumer persona. I think we'll start to see people get very finite about what type of consumers in a vehicle and taking that journey with them. These things are going to be highly customized experience. And with the infrastructure in place and the mobile edge compute in place, you'll start to see it become mobile as well. You can take this journey with you, regardless of the type of transportation you're actually taking, be it public, be it private, et cetera.
That's so true, and that I like that experience per mile. Interesting stat back to safety. I was really kind of surprised by this, but accidents and fatalities were up in the country last year, even though miles driven, for obvious reasons, were dramatically down. So we have a problem we have to solve, and your companies are helping to do that. But Samir, your thoughts, consumer focus. Obviously, Amazon as a company, that's what it's all about. But your thoughts here.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Glenn. I think you've heard many of our executives talk about how we are striving to be the world's most consumer-centric company and customer-centric company. And in this particular case, I mean, Verizon here, they're all our customers, but our joint end customers is everyone out there. So the way I want to view this is a majority of the journeys that are now undertaken are actually consumers of services going to the services, whether it's a grocery store, whether it's an entertainment event, school, whatever it may be. So consumers are moving towards services. And I think the opposite is going to start happening, where services start meeting the consumers where they are. Just like I talked about the cloud meeting data where it is. We're just an enabler of that. All three of us, really. And when we build that location graph, or I think that's the term, we enable that reduction in the number of journeys that you have to take, not necessarily in the number of journeys you want to take, right? And that has its own implications for safety, for your quality of life. And I think that's where we'll end up together as this partnership.
Great, thanks. I have a question that just came in, and I'm going to ask it. Been mulling over it, but I'm going to ask it because it's an interesting one, and it's a little bit deep. But is the customer a person or the vehicle, or both? And if you think about it, to me, it really is both. But anybody have any thoughts on that?
Yeah.
The end customer is always a person, Glenn, in my opinion.
Got it.
Everything else is a means to satisfy the end customer.
Right. That's where my mind went right away. But obviously, with all this technology and some of it controversial out in the world these days, that's some of the things we face. But in the industry, we're seeing that this technology, again, primarily is enabler for safety reasons, but making things more productive. And I love that experience per mile. As we kind of wrap up here, I'm going to go around real quick, and if you could all just kind of give a couple final thoughts. Really appreciate how you've run us through the technology and how they fit together. But Charity, let's start with you. Any closing thoughts?
I guess my closing thoughts are that I just envision a world where transportation itself is transforming. I can envision a city center so much different than what we have today. where you can actually close it off for non-autonomous vehicles and manage the autonomous vehicles seamlessly through the orchestration of the infrastructure and the V2X communication, and that you can also plan things like public transportation around that so that you do have a unique mobility graph for each and every city footprint that's unique to that city, but also optimized for the end consumer.
Got it. Samir?
Working backwards from the customer again, as long as we positively impact the customer experience, whether it's time saved or lives saved, that's really what we're after. And bringing compute capability to the edge will help that.
Got it. Thank you, Jeff.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of a hybrid of both of those. I think in my mind, I envision a world where, everything is connected and there's this shared understanding of what's going on in any given space, and being able to, whether it's a driver or a vehicle or anything, being able to consume the right information to make the right decisions in the name of, safer roadways, more efficiencies, driving costs down. There's so many applications. And then, yes, at the end of the day, I agree with Samir, the customer is always a person, and the delivery mechanism could be a vehicle, it could be a mobile phone, it could be anything. But at the end of the day, that's who we're serving.
Great. A closing thought about that customer focus. One of the things in Detroit that we've been doing for several years is we have what we call a Detroit Mobility Solutions Coalition. As you know, we have good mass transit with busing, but we don't have trains and subways. And we have a large geographical presence in the city. So one of the things that has to be solved is, how do people get to education, healthcare, and work? So your technologies can help, build inclusivity and opportunity for people is really important too. It came to mind as I was listening here to all of you. So listen, Charity, Jeff, Samir, I want to thank you and thank the folks with the auto show and your companies for being a big part of this industry and a growing part of this industry. So thanks everybody, and thanks everybody for tuning in today, and back to you, Rod.
Thank you, Glenn.
What a great discussion. I want to thank all of our panelists for sharing their insights on this technology. They have painted a very interesting picture for the future of 5G. As I said earlier, if you missed any part of this broadcast or want to rewatch prior broadcasts, simply go to the NAIS website. That's a wrap for today. I appreciate you sharing your time with us and look forward to speaking with you again next month.